Good evening. This is the Week 5 Zoom recording for our online class. This evening, I'm going to go over responsive images using the target divided by context rule and also Flexbox. So you can see up here on the right in the corner is my rule. There's a calculator. I'll show you how to do calculations. On the left is my editor, and here we have our layout. One thing that I have done is I have put a outline around the actual image. So if you go into the HTML here on the left, the image is inside a figure. This is a semantic HTML5 element, which is inside the aside, another new HTML5 element. My images are in my images folder up here. If I were to click on it, you can see that this is actually a 600 pixel image. Now that image is sitting inside an aside, which on the desktop is 960 pixels. And it's centered. We have a little bit of margin also on it. So this image is not the whole aside by any means. We just have a background color blending in to make it look attractive. So for this assignment, assignment 5, you will be putting the aside back on the page, and then it needs to be set to a width of 100%. So here we have our code. All right, now if we want to make this image responsive, we're going to access the image. And that's going to be a descendant selector, aside image. And because our outer container is 100%, our image is 600 pixels. What we want is we want that image to stay at 600 because that's where it is. However, when the container gets to 600 or below, we want that image to fill up the container 100%. And that is why we are going to use the max width property. In other words, the maximum width of this image can only be its existing size. All right, we don't want it to be a width of 100%. And let me show you why by actually doing it. The best way to learn is to do it. So if I were to say width 100%, which is what we don't want, and I'm going to show you why we don't want this. If I save this and I reload. Actually, let me not do this yet. Let's just take a look at it before we do anything. So before we do anything, as my monitor resolution gets smaller, now we've just hit our first breakpoint with blue. Notice our image is 600 pixels. It stays the same. Now, the aside is 100%, so that's going to change. Now, at some point, here's our next breakpoint at 768. When I get below 600, notice I'm going to have a horizontal scroll bar. And that's because of the image. You can see it right here. That's a fixed width. All right, so we need to change that. Now, if I were to set that to 100%, what will happen? It's going to stay, it's there. Look at that. Does that look pretty? It's going to start trying to fill in the aside. That's exactly what's going to happen. As soon as we hit 1020, 1024, or 960, I have 960 up here. I think it should have been 1024, but that's okay. That's what I have. As soon as we hit that break point, it's going to be 100%. And that doesn't look, it looks okay here, but it doesn't look okay here. That looks horrible, going from that to that. That's not very professional. Therefore, you use max width, meaning the maximum width it's going to be is 100% of its existing size. So now when I start moving it, notice it didn't jump up. It's going to stay at 600 as long as it can. And once it can't, it's going to gradually resize. Look how pretty. Look how nice that worked. That is very professional, very nice streamline change here. You don't want drastic, jumpy changes. So this is the concept behind responsive images. There are newer techniques out there that require downloading different images for the different monitor resolutions. This was the first solution to responsive images. I like it. It's very clean. It's very simple. You can work with only one image, and it's very effective in my opinion. However, you might want to look into some of the other options out there, and I have a handout on that for you on our online class. All right, let's take a look at how we would use our target rule. And if you remember the last class, we were just ball with our three columns. And by the way, these images here are 200 across. And even though you will make them responsive, you're not going to see a whole lot of a change because they're already 200 pixels. And due to the way our breakpoints work, that they're really not going to get the opportunity to be very responsive. So you can still make them responsive. There are times when you might not need to make an image responsive if it's a small image. A large image, yes, you do need to make it responsive. All right, so here we have our three columns. And if you remember, we just ballparked the width of 30%. Actually, this one should have been 1024. And if we go to our original CSS, here's call 300 pixels. All right, that 300 pixels is inside a 960 pixel width container. So, as I said, you can just ballpark it at 30%, 33%, it'll work good enough. However, if you wanted to use this target divided by context equals result rule, what we're going to do, the target is the width that we want to convert, which is 300 pixels, divided by, well, I copied that one, I need to use a slash, divided by the context. The context is the context in which it exists, is 900. And that's going to be our percentage result. So if I get my calculator out and I multiply 300, I'm not going to multiply divided by, there you go, divided by 960, and I multiply it by 100, I'm going to get 31.25%. So this is the accurate way of determining, of converting your fixed widths into percents. This is the rule, and you're going to see that rules in the book. You're going to see that rule all over the place. That is the rule that they have devised for that. So what I can do is I can go back into my media query, and I can make it a little bit more accurate now with my rule, and it's going to be 31.25%. All right, let's go back up and see what else we have set for our .call class. We also have the inside padding. Now this 5 pixels of padding is within the 300. It's inside that individual column. And as I said earlier, 5 pixels is going to really not matter from an iPhone to an iPad. It's very, very small, and you can probably leave it that way. However, just to show you how we would convert it, So I will clear out my calculator, and I have 5, which is the target, divided by 300, which is my context, equals 0.016. So I'm looking at 0.166%. So I can change the padding here in my media query to 1.66%. Now, I didn't save that yet. And, you were really not going to see a whole lot of difference because there's a lot of room on the inside. And then we're going to just collapse it. And at this point, it's not really going to show up that much. Now, another thing that I needed to do, and where did I do that? I guess I didn't do it. I needed to work with that margin, but we're going to do that now. All right, back up to our Call 3 class. So what we have set for the margin. Now, margins are on the outside. This is the top margin. This is the bottom margin. And that doesn't matter. That's top to bottom. Top to bottom is not an issue because we scroll. What is always an issue is left to right. So I have 10 pixels on the left and 10 pixels on the right of each one. So I have 10 pixels here and 10 pixels there. So if I wanted to convert that to a percent, I could do that also. Now this 10 pixel is based on my 960. It's not based on the 300. It's going across my 960 container. It's on the right and left of these 300 pixels. And by the way, just for your own information, we are using the box sizing property set to border box so that when we think of our width as being 300, it is 300. We don't have to add paddings or borders or anything. It's already calculated in there. So I'm going to use my rule one more time, and it will be 10 divided by 960. And so we're looking at 0.0416. And that's going to be my margin. That's going to be my margin. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy that whole, and I'm going to leave the 10 and the 20 alone because the 10 and the 20 are based on the height. And you really can't calculate that. That's fine. So I'm going to copy this in. And I'm only going to change the middle one, and that's perfectly allowable. It's going to be 1.04166%. And now if I save this, and I reload, as I said, we're really not going to see a whole lot of difference. Might look a little nicer. Might be a little bit more consistent. But there we go. So I wanted to demonstrate how to do this. And this is the rule that we use, and that is explained to you in several locations. Okay. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to work with the flex box. Here's our navigation. Now, the way that I did the navigation does not extend all the way across. And you could always change that if you wanted to. You don't necessarily have to. So I'm not going to show you how to work with the responsive images for these three because I just demonstrated that. You want to use the max width of 100%. So here's our navigation. We're in the nav HTML5 element. We have our standard unordered list and our li elements. If we go up to our CSS, here's the nav. Now the nav is at 960 pixel. And we did change that. Now remember, the UL is inside the nav. So the nav is now 100% width. So when we go to our next breakpoint, there it is. And the LI elements are not going to give us a problem until we get really small, like phone size. And then they're going to start dropping. And obviously you need to work with this text up here too. It's obviously too big, but that's something that you can figure out. So this style will stay. We're no longer going to be floating these because we're going to be using Flexbox. Flexbox is an excellent property for laying out small containers horizontally. What it does, it actually has the float built into it. Now, this LI first of type, I just have a little bit of an edge in here. I'm not going to need that anymore, so I'm just going to comment that out. So you actually need to go into your original CSS here and change it. And that's perfectly okay. You're allowed to do that. All this is going to stay. All the styles for the A will stay that way. And our hover can stay that way. The way Flexbox works, you have what is called a flex container, and that's going to be our unordered list. And all of the items inside it are flex items. And what we do is we tell the flex items how to behave inside that flex container. Very nice. So the first thing we need to do is we need to set the display property, display flex. And I'm using the W3C syntax. There's also a WebKit vendor prefix that you can use. WebKit first supported it, but this is pretty much supported by all of the major browsers at this point. So you have to identify what is the flex container. The flex container is UL. And now we're going to code in a flex direction. And notice they're built in here. And these are all there's a lot of different things you can do with Flexbox. Notice, it all starts with flex. Well, this is just a very basic thing. So we want row. We want it to go across. Now, that's all I really need to do at this point. If I save this, oh, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put an outline around my list, my LI, so you can see it. What do I always do? I always need to test that I can see what I'm working with. All right, so we have 2 pixel, solid, and we'll make this guy white. So if I were to save that, and I'm going to reload over here, and I'm going to pull this open. There you go. It looks identical, doesn't it? It hasn't changed. So this is our flex container. And what we're doing is we're saying that the items inside, which are technically the LIs, are going to go across in a row. And you can see them. Now, if I wanted to put widths on these, I could. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And actually, I could make them all 20%. That would divvy up if I wanted to do that. And, you know, you're more than welcome to play around with that. You can do that. You can actually do other things with it. I just want to show you a few more very interesting properties of Flexbox, and this is the justify content. And these are some of the properties. You can center it. So if I wanted to center that, look how easy it is. There you go. Now we're centered. And as I change, notice how nice it just adjusts very nicely. And it's almost okay. Except that notice I am getting that horizontal scroll bar here because my containers just don't fit. All right, this is justify content. We can do center. We can do space around, which is, I think, the one I like. So if I save it, let me pull this out. There's space around. It kind of just divvies up the space around it. Not that I really like it, but I'm just saying if these were a little bit bigger, it would look nice. And notice, it works on the desktop, works on the first media query, it's inherited, and as the screen resolution gets smaller, the space adjusts. Now it's working on the second media query, all the way down. And I didn't even write any media queries. for this yet. This is all in the original style sheets, which is inherited all the way down. It's just a very, very nice property for aligning small containers for float. It's a replacement for float, and it has built-in responsiveness. Technically, you could have used Flexbox on these three. It would work very, very nicely rather than dealing with floats and clearing floats. That's the purpose of Flexbox, to eliminate all that complexity. With floats and clears, it's always been a hassle. All right. And we also have space between. So just to show you what that looks like, it looks pretty similar, but not 100%. So I'm going to bring it out, I'm going to reload, and space between means all of the spaces between. Space around means it's on the left and the right also. So, and here again, you can also use that within a context of widths. You could give them all like 15% width, and you could have space around, and it would automatically adjust as the screen changed. So I'm going to justify content. I'll center it. Center's fine. Let me save that. Oh, sorry. Reload it. There we go. We're going to center it. All right. Now, the only thing we need to do is we need to do something for our smaller devices, because eventually we're going to see this horizontal scroll bar, and here it is. We don't want that. So let me just minimize all this stuff here. Now, so all we need to do is we need to go into the media query, and we're going to stack these. We're going to change the direction from a row to a column. And we'll do that in our second media query. So let me scroll down, and let me grab it's the UL. All right, that's what it was, the UL element. And that was flex direction. And that's going to be column. It's going to go up and down. And now I'm going to reload. Here we go. So here we are on the desktop, our first breakpoint. And now we're down like this. Now this isn't the most professional layout, however it works. And it was easy. You could have done this working with the floats. You could have eliminated the floats and stacked these things also. You could have cleared those floats and they would have stacked. One thing you do want to make sure that you have some kind of a border, a bottom border or something around these. I just put an outline there so you could see them. And there's our, so that's what it would look like on a phone. And notice no horizontal scroll bars. Everything is there. And you could actually probably, now this is just text down here. This will just wrap. And actually right now we're a little bit smaller than a phone. That's pretty much about the phone size right there. So I have also given you some resources for creating the very nice collapsible menus with JavaScript. I don't have a demo. They're very easy to implement. That's something else that you're more than welcome to work with should you wish to do so. And that pretty much wraps up my presentation for this evening.